lady in the blue. Got the first. Lady next to her in blue as well. White jacket.
Your Grace, Reverend Fathers, honored guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is truly a pleasure to welcome everyone to the annual raising of the Ukrainian national flag at Queen's Park in celebration of the 31st anniversary of Ukraine's independence. My name is Andriy Shvets, and I have the great privilege to be the MC for today's ceremony. Thanks to the efforts of the League of Ukrainian Canadians and the League of Ukrainian Canadian Women, and the attendance of our governmental, spiritual, and community leaders, a celebration of this significant day is possible. On August 24th, 1991, Ukraine's parliament declared Ukraine to be a democratic, indivisible, and independent nation. As Russia's military aggression against Ukraine continues for an 8th year, and Ukrainians of all walks of life are bravely defending their homeland against Russia's genocidal war, the celebration of Ukraine's independence takes on a new significance. August 24th, 1991, marked Ukraine's commitment to Western values and national self-determination, which today is being defended with lives and blood. Let us remember those that have sacrificed everything for an independent Ukraine, and celebrate the continued independence of our homeland, Ukraine. Ukrainians have always valued the power of prayer, and at this time, I would like to invite to the microphone Very Reverend Father Bogdan Sholi of the Ukrainian Catholic Church of Canada, Eparchy of Toronto and Eastern Canada, and Very Reverend Father Vasil Kobry, Ukrainian Orthodox Church of Canada, Eastern Eparchy, to deliver the ecumenical prayer.
І Святого Духа. Амінь. В ім'я Отця і Сина і Святого Духа. Амінь. Господи Боже наш, Ти Бог єдиний на небесах і на землі. Ти володієш всіма царствами і народами. В руках Твоїх міцність і сила, і ніхто опиратись Тобі не може. Ти сидиш на херовимах, і Тебе безперестанно оспівують серафими. То що може проти Тебе людина? Преклони, Господи, вухо Твоє і почуй. Споглянь очима Твоїми і побач злі наміри ворогів наших. Віримо, що Ти один милостивий і сильний, і можеш позбавити нас від рук їхніх. Ти зберіг раба Твого Давида від руки сильного, вкотре показавши, що сила Твоя в немочі звершується, і прийняв журбу серця Єзикії, подавши йому продовження років життя. Подай же мир і спокій боголюбивому народові нашому, і не віддай нам за гріхи наші. Бо пам'ятаємо слова Спасителя нашого, єдинородного Сина Твого, Господа нашого Ісуса Христа, всі, хто взяв меч, від меча загинуть. Тож не на зброю нашу, а лише на Тебе надію покладаємо, силу Твою відаючи. Ти твориш чудеса, від Тебе перемога й поразка, даруй Україні нашій мир глибокий, непорушний, від війни та нашестя супротивників оберігаючи, і усе благе на користь душевну і тілесну подаючи. Бо Ти є Бог милости, Цар миру і Спаситель душ наших, і Тобі славу воссилаємо, Отцю і Сину і Святому Духові, і нині і повсякчас, і на віки віків. Амінь.
Thank you, Fathers, for your prayer and spiritual leadership. Standing in the heart of Ontario at Queen's Park, Ukrainian Independence Day reminds us of our continuous duty to promote values and ideals, such as democracy, freedom, tolerance, generosity, discipline, and equal opportunity. Canada was the first Western country to recognize Ukraine's independence and thus supported our ancestral homeland and its citizens on their path of development and progress. Ontario continues to be the province that provides opportunities to many Ukrainians fleeing the war and seeking shelter. It is now my great pleasure to introduce the Honourable Ted Arnault, Speaker of the Legislative Assembly of Ontario and MPP for Wellington Halton Hills, to deliver greetings and remarks.
Members of Provincial Parliament, Consuls General, honoured guests, ladies and gentlemen. Bonjour et bienvenue. Good afternoon and welcome. Dobry den. It is my great pleasure as Speaker of the Legislative Assembly of Ontario to join you today as together we celebrate the 31st anniversary of Ukraine's Independence Day. And I know that I speak on behalf of all 124 members of Provincial Parliament, many of whom are here today, when I say that we are honoured to have you here at Queen's Park, the seat of government in Ontario and the majestic symbol of parliamentary democracy in our province. We are gathered on the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, and we recognize the long history of Indigenous nations who gathered and continue to gather here in Ontario. In a time of challenge and change, Ontario and Canada represent a beacon of tolerance, respect, and cooperation, where we care about our families, our neighbors, and our communities. Right now, these values, taken together, are a shining example to a troubled world. Today, just as we have for the last 6 months since the invasion began, we stand with the people of Ukraine. And on August 24th, 1991, the Ukrainian Parliament declared Ukraine as an independent democratic state. As was said, Canada was the first nation in the Western world to recognize Ukraine's independence. We acknowledge the contributions made by Ukrainian Canadians to our province and to our country. These span communities across Ontario and are reflected in our economic, political, social, and cultural life. Since 2011, in recognition of your community's importance, September the 11th in each year has been proclaimed as Ukrainian Heritage Day in Ontario. We remember September 7th, 1891, as a significant date, since it marks the arrival of the first official Ukrainian immigrants, Vasil Alinyak and Ivan Polipi, to Canada. Since then, as we know, many thousands of Ukrainians have adopted Canada as their home. In fact, Canada has a population of approximately 1.4 million people of Ukrainian descent. This is the largest Ukrainian diaspora in the world outside of Europe. We are all very proud of our Ukrainian community here in the province and would like to thank you for all that you've done to build it. Diversity was and remains one of Ontario's great strengths. La diversité était et demeure une des grandes forces de l'Ontario. Et aujourd'hui, c'est un grand privilège pour moi d'être ici avec vous. Again, it is my great pleasure to be here with you today, and at this time, it's my honor to call forward the Consul General of Ukraine in Toronto, Mr. Alexander Shevchenko, to present him a certificate in recognition of this important day. And it reads as follows: in celebration of the 31st anniversary of Ukraine's Independence Day, it is my great pleasure on behalf of the Legislative Assembly of Ontario to send you our heartfelt congratulations for this important occasion. Happy Independence Day. God bless the people of Ukraine.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, for your remarks and for the message. It is now my pleasure to introduce the MPP for Etobicoke Lakeshore, Christina Haworth of the Progressive Conservative Party of Ontario, and invite her to deliver greetings.
I'd like to invite my colleagues up as well. Good afternoon, Dubradan. I'm honored to join everyone to raise the Ukrainian flag at Queen's Park in celebration of 31 years of Ukrainian independence and all their contributions to Ontario. Having said that, this has been a very difficult year for Ukrainian Canadians and the entire community as Russia continues their unjust and unprovoked aggression that has killed too many innocent lives. There are no words to describe the devastating impact and loss, especially when it affects many people here personally. The bonds between our two jurisdictions runs deep, and we will continue to stand shoulder to shoulder with more than 375,000 Ukrainians here in Ontario and millions around the world. We have worked across governments and with businesses and community organizations to ensure that 25,000 Ukrainians who recently arrived have the services and supports they need to settle in their new home. This includes access to OHIP, drug benefits for those who are eligible, emergency financial aid, schools, settlement services, language training, employment training, and more. We will continue to do all we can to help them. While this year's celebration is bittersweet, I want to recognize the amazing Ukrainian Canadians that call Ontario home and for all that you do. Ontario is proud to be home to a strong and vibrant Ukrainian community who for generations have played an important role in building our province and turning it into the success it is today. Thank you to the small business owners, professionals, academics, artists, faith leaders, community groups, and everyday people who enrich our province. You are truly what makes Ontario a stronger and better place. Today, we are proud to raise the Ukrainian flag to celebrate 31 years of independence. Let us remember all those who fought, both past and present, for Ukraine's sovereignty, democracy, and independence, and honor their commitment, courage, loyalty, and sacrifice. We look forward to continuing working with the Ukrainian community to build Ontario and make our province stronger and a better place, where everyone can succeed and where their differences in faith and backgrounds are respected and celebrated. God bless the people of Ukraine. Thank you.
Jaja Chris Glover, Deputat Praventeno Parlamentu vid Spanina Fort York, and I'm joined by my colleagues Franz Jelena from Nickelbelt and Terence Kernahan from London Southwest. Ukraini, I'll do my best here. Ukrainis narad nevin moronoyu mujnistu sahishaya zvoyu batkichenu. Ми всі маємо боротися за те, щоб Україна залишалася вільною та незалежною. Слава Україні! I hope that was okay. Anyways, so today is an important day. August 24th, 22 is the 31st anniversary of the independence of Ukraine, and which happened on August 24th, 1991. And it's the 182nd day of this genocidal war. And although Russia has occupied Crimea and parts of the Donbass since 2014, for 182 days, the world has been in awe of the courage and heroism with which the Ukrainian people have defended their homeland. It's important also that this flag raising is taking place here at the Ontario Legislature. Ukrainians began arriving in Canada in 1891 when this legislative building was just being constructed. In 1991, there was a ceremony held in this very place to celebrate the 100th anniversary of Ukrainian immigration to Canada, an historical event that is commemorated on a bronze plaque just inside the main doors of the legislature. For 131 years, Ukrainians have made Canada their home, and Ukrainians have contributed to the economy, freedom, and democracy of Canada. We must all do everything we can to support our Ukrainian brothers and sisters so that next year we come here to celebrate the victory and the continuing freedom and independence of Ukraine. Yakuyu, Slava Ukraina.
Thank you for your words of support in Ukrainian, English, and French. Our next guest is Miss Mitzi Hunter, MPP for Scarborough, Guildwold, of the Ontario Liberal Party.
Good afternoon, everyone. Bienvenue. It's an honor to join you at Queen's Park for this amazing celebration. A celebration of freedom, a celebration of democracy, a celebration, as I look around the crowd, of the future. There's so many young people here today, and I'm so pleased to see that. My colleagues and I of the Ontario Liberal Party stand with the people of Ukraine. We know that it is a tough time right now. You know, as I was standing there and the cloud was covering the sun, it's kind of like what war is like. But know that that bright and blazing sun is behind those clouds, and one day it will clear. The 31st anniversary of Ukraine's independence from the Soviet Union comes at a significant moment in history. 6 months since Russia's unprovoked invasion of Ukraine. And so on this day, it is a special pleasure to be amongst so many Ukrainians in Canada, here in Ontario, honoring and celebrating our shared values of freedom and of democracy. These are values that have been hard fought for throughout history in countries around the world. And I'm inspired by the steadfast resilience and unshakable, resolute people of Ukraine. Dr. Martin Luther King says, and I'll paraphrase, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice." And the people of Ukraine are doing their part to bend that arc. The people of Ukraine are on the front lines. They're engaged in a struggle to protect not just their own sovereignty, but all liberal democracies around the world. And for that, we say thank you. Since 2014, Russia has violated Ukraine's sovereignty, territorial integrity, and independence. Despite calls from the international community to cease its violations of international law, Russia continues to illegally occupy Crimea, destabilize Ukraine through disinformation campaigns, and support the conflict in eastern Ukraine. Today, as we mark Ukraine's 31st year of independence, we also take stock of where things are now, 182 days into Russia's full-scale invasion. The Ukrainian people and armed forces remain strong in their resistance. Democratic nations refuse to be divided, including Canada. Attempts to dictate what others do are being ignored. The presence of so many friends of Ukraine here today, and indeed throughout the world, proves this. As we celebrate Ukraine's independence with Ukrainian Canadians throughout all of Ontario, we're also reminded that while the people of Ukraine are resilient, that they need our help and they need our voice. I note the way Ukrainian Canadians from across this province have stepped up with fundraisers and even hosting refugees and displaced people as they pick up the pieces of their lives so needlessly destroyed. And I know that all people across Ontario look forward to continuing to stand with you in a strong, democratic, and independent and sovereign state for decades to come. On behalf of the Ontario Liberal Caucus, I would like to say today that we stand with the people of Ukraine. Slava Ukraini.
Of a free, independent Ukraine, and for your strong words of support. At this point, I would like to invite a choir called Crescendo. They will sing the Ukrainian patriotic march, Ой у лузі червона калина, in English, Oh the red viburnum in the meadow.
славну Україну, ей, розвеселимо. А ми тую червону калину підіймемо, а ми нашу славну Україну, ей, розвеселимо. Марширують наші добровольці у кривавий тан, визволяти братів українців з ворожих кайдан. А ми наших братів українців визволимо, а ми нашу славну Україну, ей, розвеселимо. А ми наших братів українців визволимо, а ми нашу славну Україну, ей, розвеселимо. Полюлої ярої пшениці золотистий лан розпочали стрільці українці з ворогами тань. А ми тою ярою пшеничку і зберемо, а ми нашу славну Україну, ей, розвеселимо. А ми тою ярою пшеничку і зберемо, а ми нашу славну Україну, ей, розвеселимо. With glowing hearts we see them rise, the true North strong and free. From far and wide, oh Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. Oh Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Не вмерла України ні слава, ні воля. Ще нам, братям українці, усміхнеться доля. Згинуть наші вороженьки, як роса на сонці. Запануєм і ми, браття, у своїй сторонці. Душу й тіло ми положим за нашу свободу і покажем, що ми браття козацького роду. Душу й тіло ми положим за нашу свободу і покажем, що ми браття козацького роду.
Choir crescendo for your beautiful performance. My deepest apologies. I would next like to call to the microphone Mr. Mike Schreiner, MPP for Guelph, representing the Green Party of Ontario. Sorry.
Thank you. It's an honor to join you today. And when you're a caucus of one, sometimes it's hard to make it to every event. And I just want to say that 100% of the Green Party's caucus is here to celebrate the 31st anniversary of Ukrainian independence with you. It's an honor It's an honor to stand in solidarity with Ukrainian people and Ukrainian Canadians. It's an honor to stand in solidarity with my fellow MPPs from all political parties in this province. One of the most memorable days I've ever experienced in my time in the Ontario Legislature was the day that all four party leaders stood in solidarity to condemn the senseless, illegal Putin invasion of Ukraine. There are moments in history that test us. And you wonder if people will meet the moment. Ukrainians have met this moment. You've met it with bravery and compassion, resilience, a fighting spirit for freedom. I'm inspired. I believe all Canadians are inspired by the bravery of the Ukrainian people and what you stand for and what it means for freedom-loving people and democratic policies around the world. And so all I can say is we as Canadians, we cannot let time weaken our resolve to stand in solidarity with the Ukrainian people until Ukraine is free of all Russian invaders. So Slava Ukraini, and the Council, I have a certificate as well I would love to share with you from the Ontario Green Party.
Next, please welcome Mr. Ivan Baker, MP for Etobicoke Centre, Liberal Party of Canada, Chair of the Canada-Ukraine Parliamentary Friendship Group.
Дякую дуже. Слава Україні! Я вас не чую. Слава Україні! Слава Україні! Преосвященні отці, члени української громади, dear friends in government, in provincial parliament and federal parliament, to our dear friends in the diplomatic corps, thank you all for being here. It's an honor to be here with you today as we mark Ukraine's Independence Day. It is a special honor for me to be here with all of you because I had the privilege for many years to serve here in the provincial parliament. And I have to say that I wanted to also welcome not just our friends from the provincial parliament, but our friends from the federal parliament. There are a few issues that have, I think, united Canadians the way the war in Ukraine has united Canadians. And I can certainly speak for the federal parliament that there is nothing partisan about this issue in Canada's parliament. That all our parties are united, and we see representatives, MPs here today from all political parties, both at the federal level and the provincial level. And so I want to thank my federal colleagues and thank my provincial colleagues for your unity and for your support, and may that continue because that is what is required for Ukraine to win this war. I thank you. About 31 years ago, I was with my Dido Ivan, and my Dido Ivan was very, very proud of his Ukrainian heritage and immigrated to Canada after World War II, as some of you did, as some of our parents and grandparents did. And when Ukraine declared its independence, then I was with my Dido, and we were watching the news coverage. We were watching Ukraine had declared its independence, and I have to say the day that Ukraine declared its independence may have been the proudest day of my grandfather's life. And on that day, I remember him saying to me at one point, now that Ukraine has declared its independence, we need to continue the fight for Ukraine's independence. And I was about 14 years old at the time, and I said, Dido, what are you talking about? Like, Ukraine's declared its independence, the Ukrainian people want this, the world has recognized it. I said, the war is won, the battle is over. I said, Dido, I said, you're wrong. And of course, I was wrong. Today, we're here 31 years later, and we've seen what Russia did in 2014, and we've, of course, seen what they started to do again on February 24th. Today, we commemorate the 31st anniversary of Ukraine's independence. And this was a goal that our parents, our grandparents, generations of Ukrainians fought for and died for. And now, this generation of Ukrainians is fighting and sacrificing and risking everything and dying to defend the very independence that we're here to commemorate today. I think the Ukrainian people have shown tremendous courage, tremendous resolve. Others who've come to the podium have spoken to that in defending their homeland, and I think we've all been inspired by that courage and that resolve. But notwithstanding that, the situation in Ukraine is dire. Notwithstanding the victories, notwithstanding the progress, the situation in Ukraine is dire. This is an existential crisis for all Ukrainians. Millions in Ukraine are suffering, and millions more have sought refuge around the world, including here in Canada. And I think it's very important to remember that this is not just a threat to Ukraine's security, to Ukraine's independence, to Ukraine's sovereignty. It's a threat to Canada's security, and it's a threat to global security. And so the Ukrainian people are not just fighting for themselves, not just fighting for their freedom or their independence or their flag. They're fighting for all of us. And we need to fight for them. All of you and I'm looking out at members of the community, have been fighting for them. You've been raising money for humanitarian aid. You've been welcoming people from Ukraine. You've been raising money to send weapons to the Ukrainian military. You've been advocating with MPs and MPPs and others, and please keep doing that. And the government of Canada has been fighting as well. The Parliament of Canada has been fighting as well. We've sent over $600 million in weapons, most of it heavy weapons, rockets, artillery munitions. We've trained 33,000 Ukrainian soldiers before this war began that are now on the front lines fighting Russia. We've imposed sanctions. We've cut Russia off of SWIFT. We've imposed sanctions on almost 2,000 Russian leaders who support Vladimir Putin in this war. We've put sanctions on large sectors of the Russian economy. We've provided over $300 million in humanitarian aid. We've welcomed over 45,000 people from Ukraine who've come to Canada fleeing this war. And these are important substantive steps. And we should be proud of these steps. But this is not enough. It won't be enough until Ukraine wins the war. And let me be clear. Ukraine winning the war doesn't mean retaking Kherson or defending Kharkiv. It means a decisive victory for Ukraine, which means that Kherson and Kharkiv and Donbass and Crimea are all part of Ukraine. And I and others will keep fighting until that happens. So today on Ukrainian Independence Day, I hope that we honor not just the heroes who are fighting in Ukraine today. I hope we honor our parents and our grandparents and our great-grandparents and their sacrifices by redoubling our efforts and strengthening that fight even more. And if we do that, all of us together, Ukraine will win. And when they do, we'll be able to celebrate Ukraine's independence, not for 1 year, not for 31 years, but for generations to come, here at Queen's Park, in Ukraine, and around the world. Slava Ukraini! If I may, I'd just like to read a brief greeting. The Prime Minister provided greetings for today's commemoration, and they're very brief, but I'd like to read them to you. It is with great pleasure that I welcome you all to Queen's Park for this flag-raising ceremony in honor of the 31st anniversary of Ukraine's independence. This year's celebration take a more somber tone as we think about all those affected by Russia's egregious attack on Ukraine. These celebrations will nonetheless be a memorable occasion for everyone in attendance, including Ukrainians, Ukrainian Canadians, and all those gathered here in solidarity with Ukraine in the fight for global democracy. President Putin's war on Ukraine is a war on freedom, on democracy, and on human rights. Canada's commitment to Ukraine remains steadfast, and I would like to take this opportunity to reaffirm our support for the Ukrainian community whose strength and courage during this time is inspiring. Indeed, I join many Canadians in expressing my deep appreciation for Ukrainian Canadians and their immeasurable contributions to our country. Canada is a truly multicultural nation made stronger and more resilient by our diversity. This event offers an important occasion for Torontonians to gather in solidarity as we reflect on the Ukrainian community's important place in Canada and the world. I would like to thank the League of Ukrainian Canadians and the League of Ukrainian Canadian Women for organizing this important event. Please accept my warmest welcome. Signed, Justin Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada. Дякую дуже. Слава Україні!
Welcome those who chose Canada for its safety. Thank you to the League of Ukrainian Canadians and to the League of Ukrainian Canadian Women, not only for their sponsorship of this ceremony, but for their strong work and advocacy on behalf of Ukraine and our country's common interest. And Your Excellency, thank you very much for always being here. And to my colleagues from the federal parliament, from the provincial parliament, on this one, Yvonne is right. We agree. We were the first country to recognize Ukrainian independence in 1991, and I'm so happy that our close working relationship has continued for 31 strong years. And let me assure you that you have the full backing in our fight against Vladimir Putin and his illegal aggression in the Ukraine, his genocidal war in the Ukraine. But if we know anything about Ukraine and the Ukrainian people, we know that they are strong, they are resilient, and they will never give up. And I know how to overcome today's adversity, and we will be able, for years and years, to celebrate the rising of this flag in victory. We've seen for the past few months with countless stories of valor, heroism, and courage from the front lines. Not only have the people of Ukraine risen up, but the people from all across the world have stood in solidarity, and you have the support of every parliament here in this country. What we once thought was impossible, victory over the Russian war machine, is in sight. Today we celebrate the resilience and recommit to a strong defense of Ukraine and Ukrainian ideals. And if we continue to defend Ukraine against Russia, we need to all have Canada and all Canadians united, fighting for that common good. And I'm proud to be amongst the parliamentarians that are united on this one. And I pledge to do my part in Parliament to protect the independence of Ukraine and the victory of the Ukrainian people. Last session in the House of Commons, every single member, almost from every single party, spoke in their need to support Ukraine. And I know, and I agree with Yvonne, we can do more. And when we get back to Ottawa in a couple weeks, we'll keep speaking out and exposing the lies of the Russian state. And we'll keep pushing for more support for aid and those who are struggling in Ukraine. Developing our resources to stop the Russian war machine must be a priority, and I'll support the government when they do the right thing every single time. Canadians have never shied away from doing what's right on the world stage, defending our values wherever they may be threatened. And I know that if we continue in the spirit of cooperation and the goodwill in defense of peace in Europe, we will be able to celebrate many, many more Ukrainian Independence Days with victory with all of you every year here. Thank you very much. Slava Ukraini.
Brendan Fanshawe, New Democratic Party of Canada, Deputy House Leader and Critic for National Defense.
Привіт і дякую. Thank you for Thank you for inviting me here today to join with you in the 31st anniversary of Ukrainian independence, and thank you to the League of Ukrainian Canadians and Ukrainian Women for organizing this event. I am honored to speak to you today as a Member of Parliament for London Fanshawe, as the NDP's National Defence Critic, and on behalf of my leader Jagmeet Singh and our entire caucus. Ukrainian Independence Day is one of the most important dates defining the history of Ukraine, and we gather here today freely for this celebration when those throughout Ukraine itself cannot do the same to ensure their safety. And I want to take this opportunity to acknowledge all of the sacrifices, those who have fearlessly served and fought for Ukraine's independence in the past, but of course, currently as well against the Russian Federation. The price Ukrainians have paid for their independence is enormous, but serves as a reminder for all of us about the fragility of freedom and democracy, and that we can never stop fighting for what is right. Ukrainians have shown repeatedly how committed they are to liberty, and now they need our support more than ever. Canada was one of the first countries to recognize an independent and democratic Ukraine, and we must not abandon Ukraine now. Putin has waged an unprovoked war with callous disregard for innocent human life. He has committed such atrocities, a genocide against Ukrainian people. I am also proud to say that I have met several times with Ukrainian parliamentarians and officials who have told me the stories of this horror. But we also spoke about their incredible countrymen's perseverance and determination, and they shone with that pride. My party has pushed for the Canadian government, and I'm so glad that we as parliamentarians do agree on this and are working together truly to respond decisively with sanctions where it hurts. And we will continue to call on the government to be transparent about those sanctions imposed on Russian oligarchs and to properly assess whether the sanctions are in fact working and how they can work better. New Democrats have also called on the government to prioritize humanitarian aid and safe haven for Ukrainians seeking refuge in Canada. Since Russia invaded Crimea in 2014, 1.5 million Ukrainians have been displaced from their homes, and many have come to Canada after that initial invasion 8 years ago. They've successfully resettled in communities across the country, communities like in my hometown of London, Ontario. Canada is recognized for its historical leadership in humanitarian actions in the global community, and we must, of course, play our part now. We are encouraged to see the government match individual donations to the Red Cross, but again, this is just a drop in the bucket. Far more is needed. And as I said, I'm from London, and the Ukrainian community there, it's about 12,000 people strong. Ukrainian leaders in my community have been relentless. They have never stopped working to provide what support they can to their friends and families back home. But they're also working to provide that space and opportunity to Ukrainians seeking refuge here. They found jobs, homes, supports for families who now call London home. And I am so incredibly proud to welcome those folks into the community. And to celebrate those local Londoners who are now welcoming perfect strangers as friends and family and neighbors. We've seen such incredible devastation. And when people are robbed of their self-determination, of their freedoms, of their land, their way of life, it's overwhelming. This happens so many times. It's happened so many times throughout human history. And it's happening now to the people of Ukraine. And that has a much wider impact on all of us. Everyone around the world is threatened, but Ukrainians are taking a stand. They are standing up against tyranny, against a bully, against a dictator, against a challenge to human rights and to the rule of law. And they aren't just standing up for themselves, as it was said before by my colleagues. They are standing up for all of us. We must do everything we can to support them and to take that stand with them. The Democrats stand ready to help, support, and fight with the people of Ukraine. Slava Ukraini.
Ms. Matheson. Please welcome Ms. Irene Strumilo-Newton, Vice President of UCC Ontario Provincial Council and President of UCC Niagara, to deliver commemorative remarks.
Зачесніші отці, members of parliament, members of provincial parliament, honored guests. I'm happy to be here in place of our president, Taras Bahri, who could not be here, to celebrate this day, August the 24th, as Ukrainian Independence Day. However, it is not much of a celebration as our country, Ukraine, is fighting for its life, not only to maintain freedom and democratic Western views, but also to fight for the democracy of the European nations that could be next on their list. So today we are here to confirm and reaffirm that Ukraine is still independent and that it will fight until it gains all of its independence back from the Russian terror and from the genocide that is being placed upon it right now. Putin and his Russian army would like nothing better than to destroy the ideals of the democratic free world and to annihilate the Ukrainian nation. But the Ukrainian armed forces are fighting with all their might to protect their country and to ensure the defense of the European continent. Yesterday was Flag Day in Ukraine, and the blue and yellow flag has been flying to recommit, and for us to recommit, to helping our Ukrainian nation to regain its sovereignty and to maintain its free international borders. We must also remember our heroes and our heroines who have sacrificed their lives to ensure that this freedom will continue for future generations. Since this war began 6 months ago today, over 70,000 Ukrainians have arrived in Canada. Ukrainian Canadians have come together from all over Canada to help their countrymen, to make them feel welcome, to help them start a new life here. We are extremely grateful to the Canadian government and to the Ontario government for all the benefits and all the positive things that they have provided for our newly arrived Ukrainians. We ask that after 6 months, our governments and all the citizens of Canada and the diaspora do not become complacent and just let this fade away as another, war that's taking place. This is a hideous, brutal war that the Russians have inflicted. It is a genocide upon their neighbor, for no apparent reason started because Putin decided that enough was enough and he wanted power and he wanted to annihilate the Ukrainians. Like Stalin did in 32-33, we fight this war all over again. Ukraine will not die. We must continue to stand with Ukraine and defend our democratic Western way of life in Ukraine. Thank you, Canada. Thank you, Ontario. May we all live to see next year's 32nd anniversary of Ukrainian independence. Slava Ukraini!
Героям слава!
It is now my pleasure to introduce the final speaker, Executive Director of the League of Ukrainian Canadians, Mr. Oris Statsiu, who will deliver the concluding remarks on behalf of the organizers of today's ceremony, the League of Ukrainian Canadians and the League of Ukrainian Canadian Women.
Very Reverend Fathers, Honorable Consul General Alexander Shevchenko and foreign diplomats, members of Canada's Parliament, members of Ontario's Parliament, honored guests, dear community leaders, and representatives of the Ukrainian Youth Association, SUM and PLAST, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the League of Ukrainian Canadians and League of Ukrainian Canadian Women, I would like to sincerely thank all of you for the contribution you have made to today's flag-raising ceremony. This year's observance marks the 31st anniversary of that moment in Ukraine's history when the Ukrainian people achieved historical justice and their rightful place. Ukrainians out of their homes through terror. Russia truly is a state sponsor of terrorism, in particular of nuclear terrorism. We thank Canada for supporting Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity, in particular for providing Ukraine with weapons and financial support. We regret the difficult choice made by Canada under German pressure to return turbines to Russia for the Nord Stream 1 pipeline and bypass its own sanctions regime. Unfortunately, it was a direct response to blackmail by Russia. Given Canada's decision, what is to stop other countries from making exceptions to their own sanctions regimes, which already is happening in some European countries? Vladimir Putin, in recently addressing his supporters, said, "Don't be concerned. We Russians will outlast the greedy, cowardly Europeans. We in the West must not let this happen." Therefore, as Canada and Ukraine move forward together to stop Russian aggression, there can be no room for failure. The West, the European Union, NATO, and the G7 countries, including Canada, must be fully united and committed to impose a sanctions regime on Russia that is not to be broken for any reason, no matter how inconvenient. This is the only way forward. In addition, the West, especially Canada, must continue to provide the Ukrainian armed forces with the weapon systems the Ukrainians need to be successful in defeating the Russians, as well as financial support to the Ukrainian government to prevent the Ukrainian economy from collapsing. Most importantly, the West, including Canada, must arm Ukraine now. Must fully arm Ukraine now. The longer the West waits, the more Ukrainians will die, and the longer it will take Ukraine and the West to defeat Russia. Russia is an existential threat to Ukraine, and indeed to Europe and the free world. We must be resolute in our determination to contain and eventually eliminate this aggressive force, dangerous to our very existence. And so, Slava Ukraini!
Slava Ukraini! Thank you, Mr. Statue, for your strong words and leadership. Thank you all for attending today's flag-raising ceremony. We wish you a pleasant afternoon. I would invite all VIPs and parliamentarians to please stand behind the Ukrainian flag for a group photo. After this photo, we invite everyone else for a larger group photo. Thank you. If you can improve for next time.